So I'll start as always with a little review. This is not everything we've done, but it's a lot. We looked at elephants, looked at the team development assessment data. You found your innate personality, and we've charted it for your whole team. We've explored the very high percent of managers who are incompetent and why that's the case. Asked you to do the personality exploration with your spouse or friend. By the way, you should go ahead and do that if you haven't. You can go to our website and download the workbook, or I can send it to you, and there's the form. Done culture diagrams, project mindset diagnostics, discovered attitudes at the core of leadership, that your expressions of red or green storylines drive your behaviors, and your expressions of emotions manage your and other people's energy. So this is segment 7 in these narrations. Little background, I've been doing this since 1995. This is how I do our 3-day workshops. Please always download the latest slide deck for free at www.nasateambuilding.com. If you want to contact me, I'm at Charlie Pellerin, my name, at gmail.com. We're going to look at people's deepest need, and I've got here parenthesis emotional need, but emotional needs are our deepest needs, as you will see. And the reason that we're going to look at this behavior is that it's transformational in everything. If I had to tell you one behavior that would change your life, or one behavior that would change your team, it's this one: expressing authentic appreciation. So the inquiry for you is, what are your expressing appreciation habits? How do you do this? This is our diagram with 8 behaviors. This is a good time to stop and take a look at your team development assessment, and if you have an individual development assessment for how you benchmark with this behavior. Context shifting worksheet, an organizing device. This is some research that I read some time ago about by some consultants. About 20% of the workers are giving all they can. By the way, you're probably familiar with this in your work, with this, the 80-20 rule. Another 20% don't want to give more. There's nothing you can do to motivate them. But the 60% in the middle, so they would give more to their work if there were more in it for them. What is it that they want? Do you think they most want money, or do you think they most want to feel valued?
Valued.
Exactly. It's interesting. I have this conversation a lot with people, and also online, people I connect with on LinkedIn, and they say, well, it's about money. And I say, no, money is a symbol of being valued. In fact, money done poorly doesn't even help. For example, if I gave you a $5,000 bonus and I gave somebody else who you didn't think was contributing as much as you a $10,000 bonus, it would actually have a negative effect. So money is a surrogate or a substitute for what we most want as an emotional need. The emotional need trumps everything. Any comments or questions? You on board with this idea?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, actually, another comment about money. Money's like religion to me. It's another form of energy, and money makes you more of who you already are. If you're cheap, money makes you cheaper. If you're stingy, money makes you stingier. If you're generous, money makes you more generous. It's just a form of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. 70% of the workforce reports receiving no praise or recognition.
Wow.
64% of Americans who leave their jobs say they do so because they don't feel appreciated. What would your colleagues report about you? Interesting inquiry. How about your shoe store? What would they say, Beata?
It should be more money, but it's quite nice to work here, so I stay.
Okay,
Probably
good.
I witnessed this.
How about appreciating bosses? Do you think that as we work up the organization chains in business, are their emotional needs for appreciation more or less likely to be met? What do you think? I think less likely.
Less likely.
I
Yep.
think the more you move up, the less you get. And what's the obstacle? What are the vernacular names that you use for appreciating bosses? You know what they are.
Brown noser.
Brown noser, sir, right? This is a remarkable thing I learned about 10 years ago. Look at this. Departing CEOs of Fortune 500 companies cite lack of appreciation as the primary reason for leaving their jobs. Isn't this interesting? These are the guys with the big bonuses and the helicopters and the Manhattan apartments and the millions of dollars. In the end, the emotional needs trump it for all of us. Obstacles to appreciation. How about this, Dilbert? You wrote last year's date on this report. Ha ha, Swift. I enjoy pointing out your mistakes because it makes me feel better about myself. I wrote this last year. This will go faster if you say you didn't.
That's quite sad.
How about Bart Simpson's dinner blessing? Dear God, we paid for all this stuff ourselves, so thanks for nothing. So you might not have noticed it, but we're in our regular Amber process. I was showing you facts to increase your attention to the power of appreciation, and now we're going to do the M, the mindset shift. And so one of the great challenges for people is they say, well, I'm not sure how to make it authentic. And the answer is, to make it authentic, you need to first experience it. If you experience real appreciation, just talking about what you experience is the purest form of truth. By the way, going back to the unarguable truth, people sometimes ask me, what is a truth that's unarguable? And I'll say the truth of your experience. For example, if I said this room is too hot, is that arguable? Sure.
Yes.
If I say I feel too hot in this room, is that arguable?
No.
No.
One exception, spouses. I'm hungry. No, you're not. So if you can learn to live in the mindset of gratitude, you will then have ordinary events that you should appreciate. You will appreciate them. And then when you express what you're feeling, the authenticity will be there because it's your truth. Look at this. This goes back to Cicero. A thankful heart is not only the greatest virtue, but the parent of all other virtues. I maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. Look at this. We are all heirs and heiresses to a society of freedom and plenty, the most of us have absolutely nothing to earn. A lot to be grateful for. I'm interested in another spinoff of this, the abundance mindset. And some years ago, I'm in a very difficult situation. I decided to write my life vision, my life purposes, what it was about. And the first draft that I wrote of this, I wrote, I want to be wealthy. And I thought about it and realized that the time in my life I was wealthiest, I felt the poorest. And so I said, I changed it to, I don't want to be wealthy, I want to live in the experience of wealth. And the way you live in the experience of wealth is to live in abundance. And if you're trying to be wealthy, you're trying to accumulate more stuff all the time. Whenever you're trying to accumulate more stuff, you feel poor. That's a mindset of scarcity. So if you want to live in the mindset of abundance, you've got to freely give stuff away. So look at Epicurus, 300 BC. Wealth consists not in having many possessions, but few wants. This is one of my favorites. This confronts a predominant storyline in our culture. How about this? If you're not happy with what you already have, how could you be happier with more?
No, that's really great. I love this.
So back when I was started this work, I had a budget every month to give away. And so I'd call somebody up that I didn't know very well and say, I'd like to take you to breakfast on Sunday. And they go, why? And I said, because I need your help. And they'd say, why? And I said, because I'm living a life of abundance. I need to give things away, and I'd like to give something to you. And they're taken aback by it, but they'd usually do it. But one of my most interesting stories about this is some years ago, I was sitting at my desk, and a guy named Ron Billingsley's birthday came up on my Outlook. Now, when I moved to Boulder in 1993, Ron and I became very close. We biked together. He's a guy in the English department who was the academic designer for the President's Leadership class. And we became close friends. And more importantly, when I first moved here, I didn't know a soul. I was living by myself. And for all the important holidays, he'd invite me over to his house, which for him was a really big deal. He doesn't share his family easily. So his birthday came up, and I said, aha, it's an abundance chance. Now, a person, no matter what you're doing, if you're housed in the English department of a state university, I think at that time his salary was like $50,000 a year, which is not a lot of money. And they lived very frugally. His wife, for years when they were putting their kids through school, made all their clothes herself. And so Ron had this one expensive habit. He loved Cordon Rouge champagne. And once in a while I'd be over there, and he'd open the door and say, look at that, I got a bottle. And the wife and I are going to go up tonight. We're going to drink that and da-da-da. So I was thinking about Ron. Hadn't seen him for about 10 years because I left the university and I moved to 5 miles north of Boulder, which is kind of a long way away. So I went down to the local liquor store and I bought 2 cases of this champagne. And I put it on his doorstep on his birthday with no note. I just waited. So the next day, he calls me in the morning. He's laughing hysterically. He said, it was you. I said, what are you talking about, Ron? It was you, laughing. Ha ha. It was you. I said, Ron, how have you been? I haven't seen you for a long time. I said, it was you. I said, what was me? He said, stop it. It was you. I said, okay, it was me. How'd you figure it out? He said, well, I got a piece of paper and I wrote down everybody who knew when my birthday was, and it wasn't that long a list. Then I looked at the people who didn't know about my love for Cordon Rouge and drew lines through it. I looked at the people who were left and said, who would be crazy enough to do this? It was you. So I give money freely away. I support my relatives in part. And probably the most interesting thing in this regard is I take mostly my Japanese relatives, because I get along with them really well, on travel. And I've taken them several times to Europe for 3 weeks. This puts a big dent in the Visa card bill to take 4 or 5 people to Europe for 3 weeks. So the question is, what does it cost me? And the way I look at this is it's about the opportunity cost. So the question for me is, what is it that I want that I can't have because I did this? And the answer is nothing. Therefore, it's free. This is the abundance mindset. And I think you probably see this in all the giveaways of the 4D stuff. Okay, so we're going to do a 2-step process. I don't want you to appreciate a person right now. I just want you to think about speaking your gratitude. And the way I do this with the workshop groups, I modified this after I got a nice insight from Jane Sadler, Evans and Peck in Hong Kong. She was doing this with unassociated people in very large groups, and I said, how are you doing it? So what she does is she gets people to stand up and get in circles facing each other of about 10 people each. This is the end of this exercise, just giving you the setup stuff. So as we continue here, though, I got a little off track there. Do you believe it's a choice to live in gratitude or not?
Mm-hmm.
Can you pick it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely a choice. So I tell people, prepare to stand up and speak what you're grateful about. And most importantly, do not express appreciation for an individual. That's step 2. So stand up, get in circles, and I will join one of the 2 circles. Usually for a 24-person workshop, I have 2 circles. I'll be in one. The second chair will be with the other. Everybody faces each other. By the way, any exercise, what you want to do is chunk it down. Stand up, everybody. Let them stand up. Form into 2 circles and use your arms to help them do that. Now, say what you're grateful for. For example, the opportunity to work with people as motivated and dedicated as you, or what you're grateful for in your life. I usually tee this up with work examples because I'm more interested in work performance. But gratitude is about everything, your life, your family, your relatives, your work, etc. So, Robert, go ahead and say what you're grateful for in your life.
My family.
What about them? Elaborate a little.
They make me feel appreciated.
Okay, great. Nice. Beata?
I'm very grateful to live here in a nice place and in total security. I have enough food. I have the possibility to travel more or less wherever I want to. I have the possibility to go to Buddhist retreats, and so I have all the possibility to really have a good life, and I'm really grateful. I'm surrounded with many people which are really lovable, and they love me, so I'm really in a very good situation. I'm really grateful for that.
Wonderful. By the way, there's a special gratitude about you that I know that is very rare. You're one of the very few people that are grateful for your divorced ex-husband. that's extraordinary. Okay. So I want to talk about the health benefits of living in gratitude and appreciation. Look at this. This is Dr. Dean Ornish, University of California, San Francisco Medical School. He says, regarding appreciation, no other factor in medicine, not diet, not exercise, not genetics, not drugs, not surgery, has a greater positive impact on quality of life and reduction of disease. How about that? So when you learn to live in habitual appreciation, you uplift your life in every way. By the way, if you just go experiment with this, you'll find this is the case. I mentioned earlier that all of our behaviors have feedback. This feedback comes immediately. I am a habitual appreciator, and I feel it every time. Kaboom. It's great. So I mentioned earlier that every behavior is measured against a standard, and I talked about how that came about. I thought I'd show you the standard for appreciation, and it's HAPS. Habitually, habits are our personal bureaucracies. Authentically, living in the grind that comes automatically when you choose to live in the mindset of gratitude. Promptly, the sooner the better. Proportionally, appreciate people proportional to their contribution. And specifically, the more specific, the better. I did a workshop once for a guy that I also was doing consulting for, which is not unusual. And I shadowed him for a day, and he would take every person that came into his office and said something, he would say to them, good job, as they left. So he's in the room and they're in the room. And I said, what is it like when Pete does that? And they all said, we hate it. He was completely shocked. He said, why? And they said, it just sounds so rote. So this is how you want to do it. Habitually, authentically, promptly, proportionally, and specifically. Okay, comments or questions? So this is the process we're going to go through. You're going to stand up, just like we did with the gratitude exercise. If they're in the room, you're going to look them in the eye. You're going to speak directly to them. Robert, I appreciate you for your unyielding commitment to 4D and your willingness to do anything possible to help this go forward. If it's someone not not present, and I'm going to encourage you to pick someone that's not one of the three of us, and then you tell the group what you appreciate about this person, and close this with, and I will tell them when I see them. The process completes when they look you in the eye and say thank you. And as I said before, if they're not present, finish with, and I'll tell them as soon as I see them. So here's the summary. Stand up. If they're in the room, we're standing in our group, look them in the eye. Speak directly to them. Beate, I appreciate you for your wonderful willingness to accept this information and learn from it and contribute to our progress. The process completes when they look you in the eye and say thank you. And so after each person appreciates, we're going to have a little applause to encourage them. So go ahead. Who wants to go first?
That was great.
Robert, you got it. Go ahead.
Sure. Charlie, I appreciate you for your amazing leadership and your amazing ability to give sense of purpose.
Thank you, Robert.
I appreciate you, Charlie, for you're a kind of role model for me, because you really have a vision, and I think it's wonderful. It really gives so much hope for the future and our society to see that it is possible that people like you are there, and who really want to make something better. So that's really great for me to have somebody to kind of follow the ideas and a kind of role model.
Thank you very much, Beate. I've done this exercise in many countries, many places. I've done it standalone. I do it in my one-day workshops with people who don't know each other. Everyone loves this exercise. What's interesting about this is when it starts, usually the first person's a little nervous. The second person kind of gets into it better. The third person, they're grooving on it. And by the fourth person, they're asking you, can I do 3 people? This is a very powerful and moving, this is a riding the bicycle rather than reading a manual about bicycling exercise.
Right.
So tonight, or Beate, it's not too late for you, I guess. Go appreciate someone in your life right now. I had a friend of mine who was an FBI agent. He went up to the World Trade Center after 9/11 and came back, and I said, what did you learn? He said this: many words were spoken into the ears of the dead that they yearned to have heard while they were alive. Many words were spoken into the ears of the dead that they yearned to have heard while they were alive. So tonight, begin habitual appreciation before it's too late. And by the way, of course, appreciation takes many forms other than just verbal, but verbal is the one I think most useful at work. But my wife and I appreciate each other by doing things for each other, by little touches and hugs, and
Right.
you know, I make coffee and bring it to her every morning, this kind of thing. There's lots of ways to do this, but don't wait, okay? So we've been talking about health. We've been talking about feeling good. We've been talking about all these things. What about appreciation and business results? My first client was Ernst & Young, the accounting firm. And Joe Marie Danzig hired me after watching a review of my class by the Dean's Advisory Council in the business school. And so I did my first commercial workshop for her in 1995. And after the workshop, she said, you know, it was a wonderful workshop, but what I really need is for you to come help me change fundamentally the climate in the Denver office. So, you know, the industry is in a lot of hurt. It's a very bad time. People aren't able to make partner anymore. They're getting tired of working 60 and 80-hour weeks for an opportunity that's not there. We're downsizing all the time. People are doing their own taxes at home now. Our culture is broken. So I said, fine. What do you think the culture of an accounting firm is? What color?
Orange.
Yeah, that's
Orange.
what I would guess.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where is it?
8.
11.
11.
I think so.
Oh,
Nothing but orange. And so I knew what they wanted was green. But I couldn't tell them that. That wouldn't work. So I did a post-it exercise, which I like a lot. And actually, I don't use post-its anymore, but nominal group technique or brainstorming exercise. And ask the question after carefully working with them, group of about 20 people. What is it that we most want in the culture of the Denver office of Ernst & Young? And not surprisingly, the answer was appreciation. So there were, at that time, about 15 mid-level managers, my client who was the head of the firm, and 5 other senior partners who were old men, older than her, been there a long time, did not like her, did not like me. And when I showed the result was appreciation, they said, "You faked that, you made it up." So what do you think, what do accountants do when they think someone made something up? What do they do?
They don't believe it. They can't accept it.
So they audit, right? So so the 5 guys who made $600,000 a year in their Brooks Brothers suits and their Italian shoes said, "You made this up." And at that time, I had like 500 Post-its sitting on the floor. And they said, "We demand an audit." And I said, "Fine, you go ahead, and I'll take everybody else, and we'll go out for Starbucks." So the 5 of them got on the floor on their hands and knees, started ripping through these Post-its while the rest of us went and got a coffee. Came back 30 minutes later. They're standing there. They're all glum. I said, "What's going on?" They said, "You're right. This is what we wanted." I said, I knew it. So now here's where you start to see how the 4D system works as a system. Many people who do this work are green, and they would tell you, the way we get more appreciation in your workplace is teach everybody to give hugs more. Let's have dogs in the lobby when you come in. Let's get more people wearing flowing dresses and Birkenstock shoes. Let's change this place. Now, does that work in an orange culture?
Has to be authentic.
I actually don't think so.
No, probably not.
A 200-person organization is not going to go green because you want it to. It's going to stay orange. And I think what happens most of the time is that the antibodies come out and kill it off. So I worked with the HR person to develop an orange route to making appreciation happen more. So we built a form, a 3-part carbon form that people filled out and put who they were appreciating, what they were appreciating them for, and who the appreciator was. Then I got the head of the firm, Joe Marie, to agree to tie 5% of people's annual bonus to participation in the appreciation program. And then so when they would take the 3-part form, and I told them, don't believe the person who will tell you that appreciation doesn't work unless you look them in the eye and shake their hand. There's lots of ways to do this. You can do that if that works for you. That's probably the best way, but that's comfortable for you. But if it's not, you can just hand them the form. Or if you want, just put the form on their monitor while they're out to lunch. Do whatever works for you, but do it.
Right.
So this went on, and 6 months later, the Denver office had moved from being the lowest performer west of the Mississippi. And by the way, Ernst & Young is a huge company. It's at least 10 times the size of NASA, maybe 100 times the size of NASA. I don't know. The lowest financial performer west of the Mississippi to the highest. And my client soon got promoted, and she became the chair of the Kansas City Federal Reserve. So about 2 years ago, after the book came out, and I dedicated her as the first person being acknowledged, I tried to find where she was and found out she'd taken an early retirement and had moved back into Boulder. So I found her and called her up and said, let's go to lunch. And so she and I joined up, like, this happened in 1995. Excuse me. All these years later, And she said, I told her what had happened, and she said two things. She said, angels have been taking care of you since I saw you. And I said, yes, that's true. Then she said, everything I achieved in my life was because of the time I spent with you. And I said, well, I don't believe it, but it's really nice. And she said, no, it's true. She said, just so you know the power I had, when Greenspan came to my meetings, he had to ask my permission to speak. And this was all from you. And you changed my life, which is a nice thing. So my point here, though, is that appreciation is not just about living longer. It's not just about feeling better, although it does all those things. It's about real business results. Comments, questions?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just amazing that you really can, with quite a simple thing, what results can you get? What could come out of that? That's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people sometimes say to me, if you knew what you knew today, could you have prevented the Hubble mirror flaw? Or let's just go a little bit earlier. If you were in the Challenger program, could you have prevented the explosion? And I said, no question. And they said, my God, how would you do it? And I said, just do one thing. Make authentic appreciation a habit across those teams, and the communications would have flowed, and we would have known what's going on and could have done something about it. If you only do one thing from this workshop, it's go make this a habit.
Mm-hmm.
So here's some, here's the typical Amber piece we do. Pay attention to your habits. Adopt a mindset, you will make it habitual. Collect your team's accomplishments and celebrate them. So what I used to do when I ran the astrophysics division is every year, in fact I did this about a month or two before my annual performance evaluation, I would take the newest person in the division and say, go talk to every person and collect what they accomplished in the year and write it down. It would normally be about 8 pages of stuff, and with things we never realized had happened. We just completely spaced it because we're so busy. You know, technical organizations tend to be management by exception places. You tend to focus on problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have this meeting, and if we could swing it, we'd get a pizzas or something, put these view graphs up, and go through, and boy, it was a celebration. And then when I went to see my boss for my annual performance appraisal, I would put this 10-page thing on the desk and say, here's what we did this year. And he would go, oh my God. He'd just be in total shock about this. Anyone that wonders how I got all these NASA medals, that's how I did it. How about appreciating yourself? Make a list of extreme self-care items. I think it's really important to bring this work into your staff meetings. Talk about this. Make it part of your culture. How about another retention piece? Write a daily log about what you're grateful for in your family, work, and life. What I recommend people do is to take this and write this down and put it on your bedstand. What would it be like if the last thing you did every night was to meditate on what you're grateful for before you go to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
What's the result? You have a wonderful experience of glad group, both instantly and over time, as what goes around comes around. Comments, questions?
Good stuff. Wow.
It's just overwhelming. It's so easy and so powerful. It's really incredible.
It's really fun, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll move on. Let's see, we might run a little over an hour. Is everybody okay with this?
Yes, I'm fine.
I don't think we will, but we might. I like to renegotiate agreements before I break them. This is about mining the gold in your shared interests. I got this from when I was at Harvard Business School from the Harvard Negotiation Project. This is really interesting stuff. As I worked with this over the years, I had a mindset shift about it. And the shared interest piece is fascinating in that it's not natural to do it. If this were naturally wired into all people, there wouldn't be wars. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same things. But the biggest shift of all was that what I got is If you address other people's interests, you satisfy your own, and I'll show you how that works. It's actually something that starts out of a mindset of generosity toward others, but ends up like almost everything else with payback to you. So as before, look at your assessment reports, and I would stop here and let them do this. Here we are in the context shifting worksheet. I had an interesting epiphany. I was training with a friend of mine, Deborah Whitehead, 4 or 5 years ago. We happened to be at JPL. She was my second chair. And she's a lady, lives in Boulder, really interesting person. And she, while the class is working, we have time to chat, and we're up there standing together, and she comes over and says, I'm not getting my needs met in my marriage. And she told me this because I knew her husband long before she did. And she went on to talk. They ended up getting divorced, and he did some really ugly things along the way. But what came to me thinking about it was, this was the problem in my first marriage. My needs were never addressed, but I didn't even know what they were or had them. So I think it's important to first figure out what your needs, and I add to this, values and interests are. Interest is kind of a word from negotiation theory. Then the needs, interests, and values of important others, sponsors, colleagues, family. And the goal is in the intersection, and it's always there. There's always, always, always shared interest if you just look for them. My favorite expression in the world, in fact, if I were king, I'd put this on every person's desk in the world. Look at this. People do things for their reasons, not ours. Isn't that the truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the big shift I got that I referenced earlier was that I got that when you address shared interests, you make the reasons the same. You get this point? This is really important. So, think about the effort you put into if you're before you get in some relationship, marriage or something, how you're looking for things in common. The reason you're doing that is you're looking to see the extent of the shared interests. And by the way, it's clear to me, and I couldn't language it this clearly, but my divorce some 20 years ago, it's because we had no shared interest at all, zero. We got married when we were 22, and anyway. So Jim Odom, who's a name you might or might not know, he's arguably the greatest project manager the Marshall Space Flight Center has ever had, for sure. About 10 years ago, I hadn't seen him for a long time. He managed Hubble for me for about 5 years, Hubble telescope development. Wonderful person. I was in Huntsville meeting the center director to talk about 4D work, and I walk into the Marriott like 3 in the afternoon, and Jim's sitting there. And he's a full-time working executive, so I said, what are you doing here? He said, waiting for you. And I said, how'd you know I'd be here? He said, well, I happened to be in the center director's office yesterday and saw your name on the calendar, and the Marriott's the best hotel in Huntsville, so I knew that's where you'd stay. So I knew if I sat in this lobby, you'd come by sooner or later. So I sat down, we started talking, and we traded war stories about Hubble, and we talked about things we just never had time to talk about. And he related the fact when he was the brand new project manager, they had a cocktail party over at the officers club. Marshall's adjacent to a military facility, Redstone Arsenal. And the head of the science working group walked up to him and said, Odom, I'm going to make you miserable. So can you see how that's a big 1D push? What Jim said is, he centered it with a value statement. He said, no, you're not, because we want the same thing. No, you're not, because we have shared interests. Isn't that amazing? So I'm going to now share 2 rules. What this guy was setting up was a power struggle, and Jim diffused it. So my 2 rules are, 1, avoid power struggles, and 2, never power struggle if you don't have the power. So the Hubble servicing mission was a really big deal for me because having been through all the stress and trauma of the mirror flaw, what I really, really wanted was for the servicing mission to work. That was crucially important for me. So I'm sitting at my desk one day and I'm asking myself, in one of these hours of quiet time that I talked about, is there anything here we haven't covered? Anything I'm not managing well? And it occurred to me that I did not understand the on-orbit operations of the servicing mission very well. The instruments we were building were much easier than the original flight instruments. I wasn't worried about that. We know how to do that. Design had included all the things we needed for servicing. I wasn't worried about the way we built the telescope, but I did not understand the operations. I had no idea how hard it was for astronauts to do this. It looked like kind of a changing a transmission of a car in zero gravity, so I didn't know anything about it. So I said, I've got to hire a person who really is good in operations. So I went down and got permission to run some ads in magazines, and I got a guy who applied from an aerospace contractor, and he looked good. I loved this idea because NASA headquarters was too ingrown, and I thought, this is really cool if I can get an outsider to come in and broaden the experience base in headquarters. This is great. So I go down to see the head of administration who decides these things, and she looks at me just about like this and says, no. So there you go again. You do anything you can to grow your division. Now you're using Hubble Space Telescope as an excuse to go hire a person and get in front of somebody else that's more deserving. No. So I went back to my office, and I was pretty angry. It took me a couple days to process this. And I thought about it and said, well, you know, she's right. The truth is, that's what I would normally do. I just wasn't doing it this time. So I thought about the state of my personal side bank account balances. And she and I didn't like each other. I was heavily overdrawn with her, and that's the reason why she said this. But my personal side bank account with our mutual boss was excellent. A guy named Lynn Fisk, I'd known him for many years. We're good friends. We used to have offices next to each other at Goddard Space Flight Center as research scientists many years ago. An eminently sensible person. So I decided it's badge on the table time. What that means is that you're going to go into the meeting and you lay your badge on the table, which means at the end of this meeting, if I don't get what I want, you can pick up my badge. I'm going to work someplace else. And if I get what I want, I pick up my badge and leave. And I don't want to get fired. So the question is, what's the shared interest inquiry? What does my boss want that I can want for him also? So first thing is a successful servicing mission. Well, yeah, we both want that, but that's pretty simple. You know, there's no big deal about that. Peace with her and the other directors. He would like to not have other people believe that I can just walk in here and roll over his director of administration and get whatever I want, and other people say, well, how come Charlie can do that and I can't? Then I thought about some more and said, can I want that for him? Yeah, I can want that for him. And then when we had the congressional hearings, it was horrible. I mean, it was like, when did you quit beating your wife questions for days on end? And it was, I think, worse for him than me, because they addressed the questions, if we were there together, they addressed the questions to him because he was the senior official, but I knew the answers. So I had to sit there and whisper in his ear and tell him, you know, how to answer these things. So he would, what I could want for him is that he would never have to do that again. I'd also could want for him, if the thing failed, that he could say truthfully, he gave me everything I asked for. That's something I could want for him. And then finally, if it failed, that I could tell him that if it fails, give me what I want, and if it fails, I'll publicly assume full accountability and I will resign from the agency. And so I will try to indemnify you from that as best I can. So that's where I went. Next question is, what does she want that I can want for her also? I know what she wants more than anything else. She wants power and control over me. That's not a shared interest. That's her interest. I can't share that. No way. She also can want for me not to end run her in the future. Can I want that for her? And I thought about it a while. It wasn't easy, and I thought, yeah, that's reasonable. So I want to see if you can imagine the conversation I had. Lynn, I'm here to talk to you about this hire that I need for the Hubble servicing mission. And the first thing I want to tell you is I want this so the mission will succeed, and we both need this to be a success. Second thing I want for you is for you to have peace with Katie and the other division directors. I want that for you. And so if you give me what I want, I'll tell you right now that I will never end run you again. You can tell Katie every decision she makes in the future, I'll stand by it. And she controls a lot of things. She controls office space. There's a big say into bonuses. She has travel. She has hiring authority. You can tell her that I will never do this again. And we both want to never have to testify in Congress again. And I'll tell you right now that if you give me this last person, I'll make this work. I guarantee it. And if somehow I'm wrong, I will get up and tell the world that you gave me everything I ever asked for, and I will tender my resignation, and I'll have a press conference and tell them this is entirely my fault. You gave me everything I needed, and I'm gone. And again, as I said before, you can tell Katie I'll never go around her again. So what do you think he said to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Pick up your badge and get out of here.
Absolutely.
And can you see how without this shared interest piece, if I just went in there and slammed my fist on the table and said, God damn it, I need you to give me this, I'd be in a power struggle. And I'd be in a power struggle when I don't have the power. Comments, questions?
Thanks for sharing. That was powerful.
How did you manage to find out? Because when it's really about you and you are in your own situation, how could you be so wise to see it from the different perspective and to handle it like you did? That's pretty amazing.
Well, I learned it at Harvard. I learned very little at Harvard Business School. But I learned 2 or 3 things, and this was one piece I picked up there from this book, Getting to Yes. You know, when I went to that class, one of the things that was on my mind was I don't know how to negotiate. What I didn't realize is that the problem wasn't my lack of ability to negotiate. It was the fact that I had no power and I had abusive people that I was working for, which is pretty common in work organizations. And I got it that this methodology was the best you could do. And so that 16 weeks away was useful in getting away from everything and having time to just think about these things. So it was programmed into me. That was a very interesting course. It was incredibly stressful and demanding, and there weren't but a few things you could pick up out of it, but this is one. So yeah, by the way, this didn't happen easily or instantly. This wasn't a case where I just went back to my office and said, aha, I know exactly what to do. It was just I cared so much about this, and I kept thinking about things, and I don't recall, but I probably picked up that book and read it again in the middle of this. This might have gone on for a couple of weeks, this process. So this is a really fun exercise. Now, if I've got 2 teams in the room, like let's say I've got the contractor in the room and the NASA government people in the room, which is pretty common for projects. They bring the contractor in with them. So I would say, what does NASA want that you, contractor, can most want for them also? And I don't allow NASA to speak up. The other guys have to speak up. And they'll say, well, NASA wants us to perform at high levels, and we want that too. NASA people say, you did? We thought all you cared about was the money. I said, no, we have pride in our work. The money's not a big deal to us. Then you ask the NASA people, what does the contractor most want that you can want for them also? And they say, well, the contractor wants high profits, and we want that for them too. And the contractor will say, we didn't know you wanted our profits to be high. We thought you wanted to skimp down and have the maximum amount of profit to spend on reserves. And they said, no, we understand that if you make a good profit, we'll get good people. So can you see how this process works? It's just magical.
Mm-hmm.
I think the really important thing is that when you're talking about what NASA wants, NASA can't say it. Just the other guys can say it. Okay. So what are you going to take back into your work context? Check the actions in your workbook on page 13. You're going to pay attention to, which is another word for notice, your habits. You're going to recall that people do things for their reasons, not ours. And when you address shared interests, you make the reasons the same. Behaviors, you're going to routinely ask, what do they want that I can want for them also? Use these slides or have your CPM or your network provider conduct this exercise for your team. You can do it yourself or get an internal facilitator. Conduct a shared interest exercise with your family. What would that be like if you've got difficulty communicating with your kids? What would it be like if you did it with your kids? The result, harmonious and productive working in personal, interpersonal relationships and displacing stress-induced red storylines. Comments?
Good.
Okay. Let's go back to my proposal team. So now I'm in this dimension, and I said, who needs to feel appreciated, and how can you ensure this? And someone said, no one. There's nothing to appreciate about this customer. And I said, yep, I understand. So you're going to go stand in front of them and ask them to pick you for a $1 billion 7-year contract, and you're going to telegraph to them you don't appreciate them. And someone said, no, we can't do that, can we? I said, no, you can't do that. And I took a flyer. I said, how's the process been? And someone said, actually, it's been the fairest and most open process of competition I've ever been involved in. I said, well, can you authentically appreciate that? And the presenter said, sure, we can do that. And I want to be clear, this isn't a prescription. You don't sit down and say, happy to be here, we really appreciate your process. You put this in your mind and you play this out as your briefing goes at the right moment and the right time. It's in your arsenal. So rather than sitting there with a mindset there's nothing to appreciate about you, you're armed and loaded to go after this when it makes sense to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Then I said, what do they want you can want for them also? And they did this all by themselves. They want the science, okay? And they want their program to be successful. I said, can you speak to that? And they said, yes. So they did a really interesting thing. I was out of the country when they wrote the proposal, but on page 2, they made it, they got that it's very important about the personal side. They put a picture of sort of the 12 biggest managers in this whole thing, and every one had a quotation about the science they wanted to come out of this. I want my kids to read in the textbooks that I was part of making this happen. I want to be part of making a different view of the universe. I want to be part of enhancing human understanding. And boy, how powerful do you think that was? And see, let's go back to that famous Skip quote of that they insert stuff in. So if you don't fill this in, what they're going to insert into this dimension is, you appreciate nothing about us. You're a money-grubbing contractor. All you want is money, money, money. You're not in this for any other reason. And now what you said is, we're in it for the same reasons you are.
Mm-hmm.
You see how this works, huh?
Shared interest. Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now they go to their elephant and they do the work themselves. And if there's time, they talk with their partner, and then they report out. So, if there's one truism about doing workshops that I've figured out over the years, what they most feel good about is when it's about them. This is about them. Okay, we made it under the hour. I think we'll pause here. When are you are you available, either of you or both of you, later today, or we bag it for today, or what?
For me, it's possible. It's fine with me later.
I've got a family event I need to go to today.